Kareem Tolliver was the kind of kid who slipped unnoticed into Millstone High in Lansing, Michigan, another transfer student with a worn backpack and a faded hoodie, moving with quiet caution. His arrival barely registered in the school's ecosystem, where hierarchies were already cemented by the time junior year rolled around. The students of Millstone had long since divided themselves into their respective tribes. The football players with their Letterman jackets and boisterous laughter, the debate team kids with their sharp tongues and sharper wit, the band geeks who carried their instruments like badges of honor, and the loners who drifted through the halls like ghosts. Kareem didn't fit neatly into any of these categories. He was an outsider, a shadow, a boy who carried himself with the quiet intensity of someone who had learned too early how the world could grind you down if you let it. From the first day, he kept to himself, enduring sidelong glances and whispered comments about his second-hand clothes. His jeans were frayed at the cuffs, his sneakers scuffed beyond repair, and his hoodie, once a deep navy, had faded to a dull gray from too many washes. It wasn't that he didn't care about how he looked. It was that he had no other choice. Money was tight at home, and every dollar went toward rent, utilities, and the mountain of medical bills his mother was still struggling to pay off after his father's sudden death 2 years earlier. Kareem had learned to make himself small, to take up as little space as possible, to avoid drawing attention. But in a place like Millstone High, where conformity was currency, his very existence was a provocation. Brock Simmons, the football co-captain, was the first to notice him. Not in the way one notices a person, but in the way a predator notices prey. Brock was everything Kareem wasn't. Broad-shouldered, golden-haired, with a smile that could charm teachers and a mean streak that could break weaker kids. He was the kind of guy who had never been told no, who had grown up in a sprawling house on the north side of town, where his parents bought him a brand-new truck for his 16th birthday and looked the other way when he came home reeking of beer. From the moment Kareem walked into Mr. Hendrick's chemistry class, Brock had marked him. It started with small things, a mocking comment about Kareem's thrift store shoes, a sneer when he passed him in the hallway, a deliberately loud remark about charity cases, when Kareem reached into his backpack for a pencil. At first, Kareem ignored it. He had dealt with worse. But Brock wasn't the type to let things go. His cruelty was methodical, escalating from words to actions. One day, Kareem opened his locker to find his textbooks soaked in milk. Another time, he returned from the bathroom to see Brock and his friends snickering over something on his desk, a crude drawing of a stick figure labeled with his name, hanging from a noose. Kareem stayed silent. He bottled his anger, letting it simmer beneath the surface, because he knew what happened when he let it out. He had learned that lesson the hard way at his last school, where a single punch had earned him a suspension and a reputation as a problem kid. His mother had looked at him with such disappointment that day, her tired eyes asking, "Why can't you just stay out of trouble?" So this time he swallowed his pride. He took the insults, the humiliation, the way Brock's laughter followed him down the hall, like a stray dog nipping at his heels. But there was one place where Kareem didn't have to hold back, his uncle's gym. Every afternoon, as soon as the final bell rang, Kareem would bolt from school, his feet carry him across town to a squat brick building with a flickering neon sign that read Tolliver's Boxing Club. His uncle, Marcus, had opened a gym years ago, back when he was still fighting professionally. It was a sanctuary for kids like Kareem, boys with too much anger and not enough outlets, boys who needed someone to believe in them. The moment Kareem stepped through those doors, the weight of the day slid off his shoulders. The smell of sweat and leather, the rhythmic thud of gloves against heavy bags, the low murmur of trainers calling out instructions. It was the only place where he felt in control. Marcus had taught him how to channel his rage into something productive. "Anger's just energy," he'd say, wrapping Kareem's hands before sparring. "You let it sit inside you, it'll eat you alive. But you put it into your fists, into your feet, you make it work for you." And Kareem did. He trained relentlessly, his body hardening into something lean and dangerous. He learned how to take a hit, how to roll with a punch, how to strike with precision. Most importantly, he learned discipline, when to fight and when to walk away. But Brock didn't make walking away easy. The confrontation happened behind the gym, where the smokers and slackers loitered during lunch. Kareem had been heading to the library, trying to avoid another run-in, when Brock and his friends cornered him. "Look who it is," Brock sneered, stepping into Kareem's path. "The silent freak. You think you're too good to talk to us." Kareem kept his eyes down, sidestepping. "I don't want trouble." Brock laughed, shoving him back. "Too bad." The first punch came without warning, a sharp jab to Kareem's ribs. The second grazed his jaw. Kareem stumbled, his vision swimming, but he didn't retaliate. Not yet. He could hear Marcus' voice in his head. "Don't throw the first punch. But if they throw one, you make damn sure they don't throw another." Brock swung again. This time, Kareem blocked it. What happened next was almost too fast to process. Kareem's training kicked in, his body moving on instinct. A quick dodge, a counterpunch to Brock's solar plexus, a sweep of the legs that sent the bigger boy crashing to pavement. Brock wheezed, clutching his stomach, his face twisted in shock. His friends froze, unsure whether to jump in or back off. Kareem stood over him, his fist still raised, his breath coming hard. For the first time in months, he didn't feel powerless. But then the crowd erupted. Someone shouted for a teacher. Within minutes, the principal was pulling them apart, and Kareem knew, even before the words left Brock's mouth, how this would go. "He attacked me." Brock gasped, playing the victim perfectly. "I was just walking by, and he went crazy." The teachers believed him. Of course. Why wouldn't they? Brock was the golden boy, the star athlete with a bright future. Kareem was just another angry kid from the wrong side of town. As he sat in the principal's office, listening to a lecture about violence never solving anything, Kareem clenched his fists under the table. He wanted to scream, to tell them what Brock had done, to make them understand. But he stayed silent, because no one ever listened to kids like him. The fallout was swift. By the next morning, the story had already twisted into something unrecognizable. Kareem wasn't the quiet kid who had defended himself. He was the unstable transfer student with a violent streak, the one who had snapped and attacked Brock Simmons for no reason. The whispers followed him like a second shadow as he walked through the halls. "I heard he's been in juvie before. He's got a record. That's why he transferred here." Brock was just standing there, and he went off on him. The school administration didn't help. Principal Whitaker called him into her office before first period, her expression tight with disapproval. She didn't ask for his side of the story. She didn't even look at him as she slid a disciplinary form across the desk. 3-day suspension, she said, as if she were reciting the weather, and a note on your permanent record. We don't tolerate violence at Millstone High. Kareem's hands curled into fists under the table. "What about Brock?" Principal Whitaker finally looked up, her lips thinning. "Brock is a respected student-athlete. He's never given us any trouble." Of course, because Brock Simmons had the right last name, the right face, the right story. Kareem was just another statistic. Another kid from the wrong side of Lansing who didn't know his place. He took the suspension slip without another word. The school board got involved next. Someone, probably Brock's father, who sat on the district's disciplinary committee, had escalated the incident to a safety concern. Kareem was summoned to a meeting with 3 stone-faced administrators who asked him loaded questions in calm, condescending voices. "Do you often struggle with anger, Kareem? Have you ever been in a physical altercation before? Do you feel safe at Millstone High?" The last one almost made him laugh. Safe? He hadn't felt safe since the day he walked through those doors. But he kept his answers short, his voice steady. No, he didn't have a history of violence. No, he hadn't started the fight. Yes, he understood the consequences. They exchanged glances, clearly unsatisfied. One of them, a man with a salt and pepper mustache, leaned forward. "Kareem, we're just trying to understand why this happened. Brock is a model student. What could he have possibly done to provoke you?" Kareem's jaw tightened. They weren't listening. They never would. Then, unexpectedly, someone spoke up for him. Delaney Foster had been there that day, not as part of Brock's crowd, but as a bystander, one of the few who hadn't laughed when Kareem was shoved into lockers or tripped in the cafeteria. She was quiet, sharp-eyed, the kind of girl who noticed things others didn't, and she had seen everything. She went to Principal Whitaker the next day with a written statement. Brock threw the first punch, she said, her voice firm. Kareem was just defending himself. For a moment, Kareem let himself hope. Maybe this would change things. Maybe someone would finally believe him. But the school's response was a masterclass in bureaucratic indifference. They took the statement under consideration, but nothing changed. No apology, no reversal of his suspension. Brock wasn't even reprimanded, just given a vague warning about conflict resolution. Delaney cornered Kareem after school, her dark eyes burning with frustration. "I can't believe they're just ignoring it," she muttered. "It's like they don't even care what really happened." Kareem shrugged, though the gesture fell hollow. "They don't." The worst part wasn't the suspension or the whispers, or even the way teachers now watched him like he might explode at any second. It was the way the school treated him afterward, like he was a problem to be managed. He was pulled out of gym class for safety reasons. His locker was moved to a more supervised hallway. Even the lunch monitors eyed him warily when he walked by. Meanwhile, Brock held court in the cafeteria, relishing his newfound status as the victim. "Dude, I was just trying to talk to him," he said loudly, shaking his head like he couldn't believe the injustice. Some people just can't handle the truth about themselves. Kareem stopped eating in the cafeteria after that. Then came the assembly. Principal Whitaker announced it as a school-wide dialogue on conflict and accountability, but everyone knew what it really was, a performative attempt to smooth things over without actually addressing anything. Kareem was surprised when they asked him to speak. "We want to give you a chance to share your perspective," Vice Principal Green said, in a tone that suggested this was a generous offer. "It's important for the student body to hear from you directly." Kareem almost said no. What was the point? They'd already decided who he was. But then he thought about the other kids like him. The ones who sat alone at lunch, who flinched when the popular kids walked by, who had learned to make themselves invisible. Maybe they needed to hear this. Maybe he needed to say it. The auditorium was packed. Kareem's palms were sweating as he stepped onto the stage, the fluorescent lights too bright, the murmurs of the crowd too loud. He could see Brock in the front row, smirking, arms crossed. Principal Whitaker stood off to the side, her expression carefully neutral. For a second, he considered backing down. Then he took a breath and began. "If the only story you know about me is the one someone else told," he said, his voice steady, "you never knew me at all." The room went quiet. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just told the truth, about how it felt to be judged before anyone bothered to ask, about how easy it was for people to believe the worst of someone they'd never tried to understand. "I'm not asking you to like me," he said, scanning the crowd, "but I am asking you to see me, not as a rumor or a label or whatever story makes you comfortable, just as a person." The silence stretched. Then, from the back of the room, someone started clapping. It wasn't thunderous. It wasn't the whole school, but it was real. Scattered pockets of applause from kids who understood exactly what he meant. Kids who had been unseen, too. Kareem didn't smile. He didn't bow. He just nodded once and stepped away from the mic. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. The auditorium's heavy doors hadn't even finished swinging shut behind Kareem when he felt a presence lingering at his elbow. He turned, half expecting another administrator with a clipboard and a rehearsed speech about moving forward. Instead, he found a kid, couldn't have been more than a freshman, hovering a few feet away, shoulders hunched like he was trying to fold into himself. His too big hoodie swallowed his frame, and the way he chewed his bottom lip reminded Kareem painfully of himself 2 years ago. Hey, the kid mumbled, eyes darting between Kareem and the floor. You were really good up there." Kareem nodded, waiting. Compliments in halls like these usually came with strings attached. The kid swallowed hard, then blurted out, "Can you teach me?" "Teach you what?" "How to do that." He gestured vaguely toward the stage, then to his own hunched posture, as if the two were connected. "How to not, how to stand like you do." Kareem studied him. The kid's knuckles were white where they gripped his backpack straps, and there was a fading yellow bruise along his jawline, poorly hidden by the hoodie's sagging collar. He knew that kind of bruise, knew the way the body instinctively curled around it. A memory flashed, Uncle Marcus' voice, rough but not unkind. You don't learn to fight to hit first. You learn so you don't flinch. Subscribe to Black Resistance, and don't forget to share, and comment.